So the reason behind this one is actually it helps a lot of our internal devs. That there's often a lot of misunderstandings of a few concepts of caching, particularly, and we're going to focus on caching the view layer really, and nothing more than that. But yeah, let's take a look. That's me. Have a read and be impressed. Huh? 16. Yeah, he's just finished his GCSEs and he's off. He's off out looking for a job.
So you sing yourself?
Yes, I used to be a musical theatre
There
actor.
is a video existing him on the stage
Yes.
singing in the music.
Okay. I used to be a lighting designer for theatre and stuff.
Yes, we had this
We can do a
conversation.
show maybe next year.
Yeah. No, we won't show
Oh,
that next
we're looking for an evening program for tomorrow evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Frank
Just
saying,
Sinatra.
give him red wine.
White wine. Right.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So what this is what we're going to cover.
As well as it's wine.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, we moved to red. Anyway, Cachebox, general usage and overview. It's quite a deep subject, Cachebox. So I'm just going to skim it to get, like, from day to day in Preside, how and what you should be using, and obviously you can then go off deeper, and then the Preside specifics, and the two main topics that get troublesome: full page caching and delayed viewlets. I'm going to try my best to kind of make it clear what's going on, because we get some confusions, and that's a little slide thing. Oh yes, there we go. Okay, but why? So I've explained why a little bit, why this talk, but why should we cache at all? To save the planet, of course. Why spend a CPU cycle doing something that's going to have a known outcome that was the same as the last time it happened? So even if you don't need to do any performance improvements, and you know it's fine for your website to take 5 seconds to load a page, you should probably still do it for the planet and for our children. Side effects include faster response time, save money on hardware, serve more concurrent requests, leak customer data. That kind of thing, yes. So that is, yeah, so wait, what? Preside has you covered there, but you still have to not do it. So that's delayed viewlets, which we'll get to. So Cachebox, 20,000 foot, comes with Cachebox. Comes with Preside. You can install it independently, but if you're using Preside, you don't need to. It's there. It's configurable in extensions and in your application, and extendable. Yeah. So configuring Cachebox in a Cachebox or Preside application is done through a cachebox.cfc that lives in theory anywhere, but in Preside it'll be in your application under config/cachebox, and the configuration looks like this. There's a cachebox structure that's in the variable scope of the component, and somehow Cachebox pulls that out. But anyway, you define a cachebox structure. Keys can be default cache, which is a cache definition, which we don't really use in Preside. And then a caches structure, the keys of which are IDs of caches, and their values are another structure, which are cache definitions, and that's it. So it's pretty straightforward, really. A CFC that defines caches. A single cache looks like this. It has two keys, a provider, which is a class path to a CFC that follows the cache provider interface provided by Cachebox. I'm not going to go into it in this talk, you'll be pleased to know. And properties. So that properties gets given to your cache provider, and depending on the cache provider, will do different things with it. So the one that Preside uses for all its caches is our own cache provider that's basically extends Cachebox's ones. And does a few tweaks for performance, specifically to Preside. But yeah, follows basically the same patterns. And so in this example, the properties for this one is we're going to use the concurrent store, which is an in-memory store. The object default timeout is 120 seconds, minutes. Yeah. There's the last access timeouts, whether those are used, read frequencies, eviction policies. basically whatever, if you're providing your own Cachebox provider, these configurations is going to be entirely up to you. But yeah, there's a load of things that you would think you're going to need for caching in there. I'm not going to go into it in any more detail. It's just a cache that is defined and can be used and has a same interface no matter what implementation you're using. So the Preside Cachebox definition lives at Preside system config Cachebox. Defines 11 caches and counting. Example caches, it defines the configuration settings for the template cache, which is the default cache that Cachebox uses when you do render view cache equals true. Has our default query cache, which we do all our query caching in, permission cache, Preside page cache for full page caching, and a whole bunch more. And if you are defining your own caches or your own cachebox.cfc, you really should extend that one. We had a support request come through when they just weren't doing that, and so they wiped out all of Preside's Cachebox definitions, and so various things didn't work. I'm not going into that in any more detail. So if you have a Cachebox CFC in your application, it should look something like this. So it extends Preside system config Cachebox, has its configure method, and first of all, before it does anything else, it should do that. If it doesn't, things will break for sure. And then you can do whatever you like there. So you could add your own caches, or you could loop over all of the existing caches and change their provider. So you could change them all to REH cache provider instead, for example, and then tweak some properties based on that. Eat your heart out, but yeah, that's really it. So the final place you define a Cachebox CFC is in an extension, as long as you're using Preside 10.24.1 and above, all the versions above that. Yeah, this was implemented yesterday on the train. I was doing a slide, I was like, well, and then you just do the, oh, you can't do that. So this is how we configure wirebox in an extension. I was like, oh, you can't do that. So yeah, you can as of 10.24.1. If anyone's desperate for that to be patched back to a version, do shout out and we can get it done. But I think given that no extension is going to be doing it today, it's unlikely. But yeah, so hands up, you can point out the difference between the application one and the extension one.
You're using var scoping. Arguments. No, there's no super.
There's no scoping issue here. That is the variables.cachebox. The best. Yeah.
It's kind of a similar concept as with configs.
Right?
Exactly. So the extensions can't extend because there's like, let's say 100 extensions, one application, one Preside. You can't have like an extends chain that works. So your application can extend Preside, and that's fine. Those are the only two ones that will work in that way. All the extensions have a configure method, and they get given the Cachebox structure in its as an argument. So Cachebox gets given as an argument in configuring your extensions, and it's just assumed to exist in the variable scope in your app. So any modifications, all you need to be doing is modifying this Cachebox structure that comes as an argument, and that's it. Everything else is the same. That's true for extension config and extension wirebox as well.
Is that a single namespace?
Single namespace?
So if my extension cache, if I had two extensions with both my extension cache,
yes. No, it's one. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you definitely need to make sure your caches are named uniquely. Cool. So we can see that we can define a bunch of caches. Some other examples, you might want one that's a disk cache or a database cache that persists between application stuff. So you can do all of that. So you can do your own caches. When you want to use them in your Preside/Cachebox application, here's how you can do that directly. So you can use Wirebox's DSL for Cachebox. Wirebox DSLs are my favorite Cachebox Wirebox feature. Cachebox : the name of the registered cache as the inject, so that's either as a property in a service or a handler, or in a constructor argument with inject. And then you've got your cache object. You define a unique key for your cache. You can call cache.get. If that's not null, then you've got it for cache. And once you've got the value, you can do cache.put and put it in there. Then when you do cache.put, I think you can also, or you can also put in properties like timeouts and things, and depending on the cache that's being used, those will be used. We tend not to do that, just create a different cache definition, but you can. But I'm not going into that. That's the general usage, cache.get, cache.put. There is also cache.get or set, which you add a closure in there for producing the value. I suspect it's less efficient than doing it in a plain way. But yeah, that's using a cache directly, so we will try some of that out. So then, kind of getting closer to the main topic here is how we use them in views. So render view, you can pass caching arguments into that. You can say cache equals true. What that's going to do is use the template cache, and it's going to create a cache key that is a combination of the path of the view and a serialized version of the arguments that are passed to it. And that's it. There are some more things you can do with that, and there are more than what's in here. So you can do different cache timeouts, last access timeouts. But if you don't want to care about doing individual cache entry timeouts, you can pass in the cache provider, so a different one than the template cache. So we have like a CMS extension for like a whole bunch of common CMS layout stuff, and it has its own cache for that. And then a cache suffix. So if the view and the args are not enough for the cache key, you can add more things that are logic specific here. So in this case, we might want to have a different version of what's in cache depending on whether the admin is logged in or not. For example, and you might have some other examples where that's the case. So render viewlet is a preside function, even though Cachebox talks about viewlets, they don't really have, it's not really a first-class citizen in Cachebox. Render viewlet is really a wrapper to run event. But yeah, you can pass the same cache arguments to render viewlet. The other thing you want to do with caches, other than clear them, which I'm not covering, if you've got a cache object, you can do .clear all, or you can clear individual cache keys with that object. But yeah, you can get stats. So in the admin console, in the admin, you can run cache stats and find stuff out. And obviously, pure Cachebox, there's a interface for getting stats out that you might want to pump out for your own metrics elsewhere. So in our Prometheus dashboards for each of our applications, we've got a graph with all the caches on them, and there's, because we use a cache per preside object, there's hundreds of caches, so the graph looks really tasty. Yeah. Okay, what's the time? Half past. It's a nice picture. So that's what we've done so far. Here's where we're going. We're going into Preside now. Full page caching, brutal. That's the idea behind that punch. So it caches the whole page output in one cache. It's the most brutal cache you can have. The cache key itself is it's a unique cache entry per the URL, full URL, including the domain and the query string, and whether or not there is a front-end user logged in or not. The motivation for that being that it's really quite often you're going to have quite a different, say, top menu, depending on whether someone's logged in or not. Anything further than that, like user-specific things that are shown, we'll cover, but 2 versions of every cache. So it uses its own Preside cache that's defined in Preside's core Cachebox CFC called the Preside page cache. So if you want to reconfigure that with different parameters, like put it in, it's a disk cache by default. but you might want to put it in memory, but make sure you have lots of memory if you do that. Oh, I covered that. So the reason Mishi doesn't like it, and I think shared by everyone, it can be quite confusing for users. Like if you're logged into the admin, full page caching doesn't happen for a good reason. But yeah, so there might cause confusion on why is this not showing. There is a button in the admin that happens over the site tree to clear all the caches when it's enabled, but still, yeah.
That's confusing.
Yeah.
It's like you go and change something and it doesn't work and you have to flush the cache.
Yeah, well, cache invalidation. One of the easy problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
So it's disabled by default, full page caching. You enable it, like so. So there's just feature switches, so in your config CFC there's now, as of a fairly recent version of Preside, there's 2 feature flags, full page caching, and you can enable it that way, and then also full page caching for logged in users, you can disable that, so you can say, well actually, so long as we don't have a logged in user, let's keep full page caching on. You might want to have the other one as false if you really, even though you can make sure that data doesn't get leaked, you want to make absolutely sure is that, okay, well, full page caching is not going to be to blame because we're turning it off once a user's logged in. So yeah, so there's a whole feature just for that. How do I disable it? So, well, you can disable it globally by obviously switching that feature off, but on a per request basis, you can prevent full page cache happening with event.cachepage. Now this is a point of confusion number 1. Event.cachepage true doesn't do anything unless full page caching is enabled and perhaps event.cachepage false has been called previously in the request. Otherwise it's not going to do anything. But yeah, so event.cachepage, true or false, sets whether or not in this request we want to cache the result of it. If it's already cached, that logic's not going to run. So it'll be too late, right? It's just going to get it from cache and serve it. But yeah, it prevents it from being put in the cache in the first place. You can also use it to query whether or not, what the setting is, right? So if you don't pass any arguments, it's going to return the current assumption. And we've got this function here called event.preventPageCache. Who can tell me without reading that what it does? Too late. Too late, yeah.
I've learned something.
There we go. This is what, this is an unfortunate confusion. So event.preventPageCache. Let me side request. I'll show you what that function does. Prevent page cache. Sets those CF headers. So we call that in the admin, in like every admin request has that, and it just prevents you hitting the back button and the page showing what was there before. Security best practice, right? So this is something to use in any pages that have sensitive data in them, or you can't double click an image. Event.preventPageCache, yeah, use that in all of your sensitive data pages. It's in the admin by default, but yeah. It unfortunately is nothing to do with full page cache and looks like it is. It existed before full page cache. But yeah, event.cachepage false turns off full page caching for that request. Why would you want to do that? This is a point of confusion.
Climate change isn't real.
Pardon?
Because climate change isn't real.
Because yes, climate change is not real. Yeah. Why else might you want to turn full page cache on? Just for one page.
Because you've got some PII on that page.
Yep. And that's the point of confusion. So that you use delayed viewlets for. So you either are going to use full page caching or you're not. So if the page you want to avoid some things being cached for uses most of the shared layouts that are in all the other pages. You can still cache that.
But system pages are full page cache.
No.
No.
No? Exactly. So a place where you might want to do it is like an API call or something like that, where you don't want it to be cached and you don't want to use full page caching. So if the majority of the page is sensitive, is where, or like private or not cacheable, then you might want to do that. But there could be whole loads of the page that is still cacheable, even if it's got like one bit of sensitive data in it. You should still cache the page, but then just make sure that bit is not. Okay. Hopefully that's clear. We'll demo it. Right. So, tip: use both. If you're going to use full page cache, you should still also cache little micro bits of it using regular Cachebox view cache and the template cache. So here's the Preside website, and the navigation, the whole header has its own individual cache. Because let's say there are, not in the Preside site, but you've got like 2,000 pages. Chances are, even if you've got full page cache, you can have 50–60% of hits hitting cold pages that aren't cached. And the nav header is the same on every single one, other than what the active page is, which you can actually solve with CSS or JavaScript. So you can actually cache the entire header. So you should. And if you've got like, let's look, preside.org. If you've got some little snippety thing like this, what is the Preside platform? Maybe this whole section here and its argument input is going to output the same thing every single time. Cache it, because it might get used in multiple pages, right? So cache all the little things. And yeah, if the cache key, especially if the cache keys are like all the arguments you're passing to that view, and it's just going to render them as are. Like even if that data changes, the arguments to that view are likely going to change. So you could just cache it with confidence and cache it for a long time even. But do that in combination with full page caching. Yeah. Different things, both valid. Cool. So delayed viewlets. Coming on to the main crux of the problem, right? You get hands up who's had that happen on a website with caching. Cool. Yeah, people have just been too aggressive and too sloppy with their caching. And yeah, first user that logs in on the cold cache gets their value cached. And if it's welcome back that person, that's mildly annoying and still an issue, but if it's something like, yeah, update your bank details, more of a problem. So, delayed viewlets, and how to use them. How do you use them? Like that. So this is Preside entirely. This is not Cachebox. You can do render viewlet, and it only applies for viewlets, and you can say delayed equals true. And that will mean that will never be in any caches. Now this was implemented when we did full page caching, and it used to only have any effect with full page caching. But actually it's still useful, because if you do render view and cache it, that could in turn render some rich editors that render some widgets that have a widget to show the logged in user, right? If you do this, all of that content will get output and put in the cache, but this little viewlet part of that will not be cached. It'll just have a placeholder in there that has the information that we can use after we've got the page from the cache to go through and go, oh, I need to render this delayed viewlet, right? So it happens after all the caching. So yes, render viewlet.
Conceptually, that works pretty similar to widgets and asset rendering in the sense that it uses like a placeholder bit of text that you
Yes.
parse out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one way to do it, is explicitly when you render the viewlet, delay equals true. The other way, and I would say you could always do both, but the one that you should really do on the viewlet is put cacheable false on the viewlet handler action, and that will have the same effect. Whenever you do render viewlet for this welcome user, it's going to be delayed because it's cacheable false. And that absolutely prevents it from being in the cache, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to do event.cache page false just because you're outputting some private data. And you should do this whether or not you are using full page cache.
So does that cacheable true override anything you might have on the viewlet settings?
Cacheable false, yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if I put delay equals false or something.
Yeah.
It would ignore that anyway. It would just use.
I think so. Might not be though. But if you put delayed equals false, then it's obviously a very clear wrong reason.
So when you're actually caching the full page with this section in the middle, which you're not caching, you said you're using a placeholder in there?
Yeah.
So you're doing string parsing each time to actually rebuild the page?
For sure.
Why
Yeah.
don't you split it into an array?
An array that lives where?
So you've got a page with 3 items in it. You've got this, welcome Jon Snow, you've got the header and footer.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And so you're doing string
Yeah.
parsing each time, which is actually one
Essentially.
overhead. So you can actually just pre-split it in an array.
Yes.
Pull request. It's a trap.
I guess the processing will happen when you put it in the cache, right? But then after, because it will be a string as it goes in. And also, anyway, implementation. But yeah, that's it. So a bit of nuance to that. System page types. So like homepage is a system page type. By default, if it has a viewlet, yes, a system page type, if it has a viewlet to render that system page type, this is what you're getting to, by default it will be cacheable false. We figured that system page types will often be used for sensitive data, and we thought, let's make them not cacheable by default, just as a bit of protection. So it's not the whole page caching is turned off. All the kind of layout around the system page type is still cached in full page cache if you've got full page caching turned on. But by default, we're saying that system page type viewlets are not cacheable.
So that does mean if somebody does something dumb in a header, it's still going to be a problem, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you want it to be cached, you have to explicitly say cacheable true. So the home page, for example, bit of a pain, but and that I think this only applies for full page cache. So, a little nuance, but that's it. Okay, delayed view. So tip: delay only when you have to. So here's an example. Who could tell me why and what's going on here?
Condition is dynamic, therefore if a condition is used, then you don't want to.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's doing some code review on a widget that was, and what in fact the code review I was doing widget on, which is the motivation for this talk. In this widget, they had it was using a condition to, like a dynamic condition, to decide whether or not the widget was going to show. So that could be like user specific. So it needed to not be cached, right? And regardless of anything, the first thing it did was event.cache page false. So it turned off all caching just for this one widget that was like a table of content widget or something.
Was it called? It was a call to action.
Call to action, right? Yeah, just
It's
a
just
button.
a button.
Yeah. So you're turning it off. And then I understand it because it's confusing, and I'm hoping this is going to clear it up. But yeah, so the tip is there are so many ways you can cut it to go, okay, if I don't have a condition, then it's fine. I'm just going to output it as normal, and if it's within a cache, it'll be cached. But I need to make sure it's not cached if there's a condition. So we can do this, and yeah, so just run a different viewlet and put delayed equals true on it, or put cacheable equals false on the handler. So this one will never be cached. You could then put cache equals true on the render view, right? so you're like not caching as much as possible. You're caching as much as possible if you want to do the cache. Right? Yeah. Oh wow, really? Oh wow, cool. What's the time?
You got plenty.
Do I?
Yeah,
Plenty.
The whole evening.
What's the time? 2:48. Okay, fine. Right. So I just want to demo some of those concepts because I know it's a lot of talking. I created a database earlier for this, once we get the name right, and so we don't hit that. Right. Okay. So what we can use to demo caching, and let's come over to the code straight away. Caching demo. So we need to turn it on. So I like to do things like this. So we've got a configure method that is just a bunch of private methods that tell you what they're doing, right? It's not the right or wrong thing, it's just, this is how we tend to do it. So but let's go to what we've got for features. And let's put in, oh, it's already enabled. Hey, excellent. Right, full page caching is enabled by default in the skeletons, but not in Preside. And that's while that's starting up as well, take a look at the Cachebox it's done. It's kind of nicely given you an empty one. Sweet. So, what I thought would be a good place to start is looking at a page. So this is coming back cached. It's very complicated, bless you, homepage. One thing you can do to debug is look at the homepage and out response headers, which I know are going to be tiny, but you can hopefully you can see here you've got xcache is hit. I do blah equals true, yes. I should see xcache miss, and then hit. Okay, so that's full page caching. So let's put in our home page. We're going to create a widget. Who remembers I did this for the first time in about 8 years yesterday? Creating. Oh no, you're kidding me. Like I said, that works.
Is the URL rewrite?
Yeah, I did have that working. Maybe it had crashed before it got to that bit. And so never wrote it into cfconfig when it broke before. Okay. So let's just create a widget through our handler. I'm going to do it manually and not do it through the list. So, which is widgets. Widgets, the date.cfc. It's going to be a bit raw and nasty. Private string function index, I think. Right, that's my widget. Yeah, I already did the setup. So, because it wasn't an empty database, let me shove the widget in, because this is useful to demo the concepts, right? So, reload. That's what I need, isn't it? It's a handler.
Lucy 6 has got a directory watcher built into it, so you can actually automate the reloads and load development locally.
Yeah. Fine. Obviously, I just did a very rough widget, right? It's just a handler. So yeah, there we go. The widget. So now, when we view the home page, you can see the date. Or maybe you can see the dates.
You're logged in. Is that with you?
I am logged in. Yeah. Exactly. So that was the first thing I wanted to show. When you're logged into the admin, it doesn't cache it. And now the time is not changing. Da-da. So, how do we, because this is critical, right, that we need to show the right time. Obviously that could be critical human data. What do we do to make that bit of the page?
Prevent cache. Oh, that's fine.
Prevent page cache.
Cacheable faults.
See it flush through.
Huh?
See it flush and through.
Yeah. Cacheable false. And for a widget, that's the only way you can do it, right? Because unless you're manually rendering your widget rather than putting it in a rich editor, that's the only way you can make this delayed. So if I reload. 1, 2, 3. Not bad. And we load the cache just to be sure. Hey, so that whole page is oh, and actually let's validate that. we're getting the time increase, and it's still a full page caching. Huzzah, that's it. End of talk.
Drops mic.
Hey, yeah. I did have some others, but I do think that's probably going to cover
So
it.
the Xcache header,
Mm-hmm.
that's being written by our full page caching.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even though it's got dynamic content on it, it's still saying it's a cache hit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's turn this off, actually, and just show some other things that you might not be aware of out of the box. You've managed to get the terminal come up twice, and can't toggle it away. Right, so it's now coming out the same always. If I edit this page and put in that. Gosh. Was that supposed to be your meeting? It didn't run forever. Oh, idle time, because I was the only person in it. If I choose conditional content and put in a day of, current day of week is Wednesday. And we put in our widget. So this is a cacheable widget, right? Not this day. Right, Wednesday content. And we can see time is changing. Because?
Condition.
Yeah. So the conditional content widget always has cacheable false on it. That's it. Somewhere else. I was going to do a page type, but I think hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. Not logged in. I was also going to do an API call, and actually that would be a good way to show, like using event.cache page equals false. I mean, let's do that here as well. See what happens. Event.cache page. False. Probably don't need to reload, but it's so quick on my nice thing. Just want to show it off. And that's with the zoom shift. Okay, so now the whole page is not cached. Let's see what headers we get. Do we get anything at all? I think we just won't get a header. Oh. You know why? Why?
Page caching is still enabled in config.
It is, yep. And the page is already cached. And reload all does not clear out the disk caches. So if you do reload caches as well.
So it's not everything then.
Well, it is.
all
Reload apart from caches.
Reload almost all is justified.
Yeah, well, I just realised it's still telling me it's. Ooh, okay. There's an issue there. I definitely did that in the right place. That's weird. Caching demo handles widget, still widget. Yeah, okay. Well, let's imagine that that didn't cache the page. I must have done something wrong. Yeah, that's it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in that talk. That's what I was going to do, is doing a manual cache and storing a cache result.
Because that's in the delayed renderer,
Yeah.
it's already got the rest of the page from the cache before it's...
Yeah, but the cache it's not in the
it's
cache
not-
already. Let's just double check actually. So the first time it hits, it should say a miss. Even though it shouldn't use it at all, right? Oh, cache is idiot. You see how quick that was?
No, I missed it.
Was it fast? I thought it was fast. Miss.
Miss. Wow. No idea. Okay.
You do You do this widget with a delay viewlet inside it, so it shows 2 times. One's going to be cached, one not. That,
Would have to be 2 different widgets, right? Because it's either the whole thing.
You could have one called the different conditional content rendering and one not.
Yeah. I think, yeah. We know that works, though, right? Anyone else like to see anything else?
Like, question, where you've got kind of Cloudflare at the top of this,
Mm.
you've got settings on Cloudflare for
Yeah.
cache. When it comes about the hit and miss, is Cloudflare then pulling from its own cache, or do you have
Yeah.
to
So we have, so this is purely at the Preside level, of course, and there's, could be, I don't know, however many layers between that and the user, right? So Nginx has caching, and we do Nginx caching. We only do that if there are no cookies present in the incoming or the outgoing request, and it's a GET request, the only time we do that. But yeah, so you could be cached on Nginx, you could be cached at Cloudflare. This has nothing to do with that, and it doesn't affect it.
Is the Cloudflare will be influenced by your prevent page cache, won't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, and
So that's my-
browser
Yeah.
caching as well, yeah. And the default browser caching won't be that if you hit the page, it's going to get it from its local cache, right? It will be if you hit back, it gets it from the local cache. Whereas, yeah.
And on the conditional widget, so if the condition set conditional widget is never cached,
Yeah.
but if inside your conditional widget, you've then got a widget that can be cached,
Yeah.
does it kind of cascade down that
No.
none of that's cached? Or does
Yeah,
it still
exactly, right. So that's why it's important to, if you want to like cache as much as you can, to cache at micro levels as well, right? So if you've got a widget that's really easily cacheable, because it's once you've got the input, the output is never going to change. Like cache it and like for a long time, and maybe to disk for a long time, right?
So a widget that you put in the condition stuff will still be cached. It's just that the
No, it won't be. It won't be unless it's got its own caching.
but if you it's
Your delayed renderer will render your widget delayed, and the bit inside it will get from its cache if it's cached.
yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking more if I say I want this widget to be cached,
Yeah.
but I use it in a conditional content widget.
You know, it
Yeah.
can't possibly do
Yeah.
that. There's no way you could do that because you don't know the path of the logic inside this thing that you're not rendering yet. You can't kind of find out what might be cached within it without running it, right? And you're not going to run it until everything is from the cache. That's confusing things.
2 questions.
Yeah.
You said there was an object cache already implemented for objects?
Objects as in queries?
No, really the object item.
What do you mean by object?
There's a Preside object cache, I think, which
The definitions of objects?
does all the definitions.
There's not only for the definition, not for the content of the.
Yeah, that's so that the
query cache.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the
Query
query. Okay.
cache,
yeah.
And the second question is caching a cluster.
Yes. So I did have that as a topic, and I thought I'm going to probably run out of time, and I was right. But yeah, so we use for that we use an extension, a Cachebox cache provider that we wrote that's CBEH cache that uses a networking cluster thing that you can configure to say propagate puts and deletes across your cluster. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that because that you depending on how your network is set up for your cluster, it's going to have maybe a difficult figuring out how to do that networking bit. The alternative, of course, is to use something like Redis, and there's a Cachebox cache provider for Redis. So basically you're switching out the provider, and hope that and you could do that. So in your application, it's quite tricky to do that at the extension level because the load order, right? You kind of want that to be the last thing that loads. So anything else that's registering its caches, that you're going to loop over and go, okay, now use Redis, use Redis, use Redis. Yeah, there are other ways you can use an interceptor as well and get gnarly with kind of doing that at that level where you want to make sure that any caches defined anywhere in extensions and so on are all using Redis. you need to do that at that kind of level, but you can do that. So you're basically just choosing a different provider.
Is EH cache running inside the JVM or is it outside?
Inside, it's all just part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no separate EH cache.
You said that full page cache usually uses disk
Yeah.
cache. Is that ephemeral disk when it's on a cluster in our case, or?
No. So you will get lost at the restart. Yeah. And what you might want to do, or you could do, if you're using our kind of the CB EH cache and CBJ groups, is figure out a way that when something joins the cluster, it can pull down the cache from the other nodes. It would be nice, but it should be doable, but it might take a while.
It's a common case that you need to manually clear the full page cache. I think of scenarios where, for instance, you might have like a widget that uses an asset and then someone loads a new version of that asset, and
Yeah.
obviously it becomes
Cache invalidation being hard, right?
Could we use the dependency tracker to somehow hook into
No.
cache invalidation?
No. It's when I never used to believe it, like cache invalidation. Oh, what do you have to do? So the cache key, right? And we do track like so for query cache, we do cache invalidation automatically, right? So when an object gets an insert data or an update data, we try to intelligently clear any Preside query caches that relate to that. When it comes to something like a full page cache, or even a cache of an entity in some other way, there can be, like with the dependency tracker, all those relationships, something changes somewhere else that is never going to trigger that. And you can't just trigger, I mean you could clear caches whenever anything changes, right? And then there's no point caching anything because things change too much.
My point was, is it like clear the whole cache, or could we maybe, if it doesn't exist yet, which I did assume, like selectively clearing parts of the cache? If you like have like a large site and
yeah.
What you're saying
This one is
perfect,
brutal.
right?
This one
Yeah.
is brutal because it's the kind of editor's last attempt.
Yes.
Their only path. So
Yeah.
it does clear everything just to kind of make sure that, okay, the regular invalidation didn't work, fine, fuck it.
But you can do it on a page level.
Oh, you can, can't you?
Hmm?
Can you?
Uh,
Is that a question?
Yeah. What's the question? Can you clear the
When you save a page, it clears the cache for that page.
Yeah, but there's no option to drop down to say
No.
we
I
move
don't-
from.
Or is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say that cache
Of course there is. Yeah.
I mean, you can
And-
say it's not perfect, but you could, if you were doing a content managed thing, you could say, you know, we are going to hook into the dependency tracker, for example, if they...
The issue is the dependency tracker queues it to be scanned before it does it. So it's, yeah, again.
It would never be perfect.
Is it a good idea to enable the full page cache in the default skeleton? Is that something
Maybe not. Maybe
you
not.
should turn around and default behavior not to have full page caching?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.